Hello, everybody, and welcome to another edition of Good Stuff. My name is Kevin Billy, and as always, we are excited to have you join us today in what is going to be already guest number 41. If you have found the first 40 videos to be extremely valuable in your life, we'd ask you to head on over to YouTube, type in Good Stuff with Kevin, and subscribe. Well, hey, today's guest probably needs no introduction, I guess, but for the sake of introducing him, we are joined today by David Baker, President and CEO of the Pro Football Hall of Fame, just right down the road. David, it is great to have you.
Kevin, good to be with you. I hope you are safe, healthy, and strong in this kind of unprecedented environment we're in, but I think the very best is still ahead.
Thank you. Yeah, very much so. I appreciate that, and likewise. Hey, I wanna begin, David. You know, when I moved back here a couple years ago and heading up there and hearing about, being a coach all my life, culture, mission, values, and when I sat in there and I heard the mission, and the values, the honor the heroes of the game, preserve its history, promote the values, and celebrate excellence everywhere. Let's start there before we go to the values. I think they're not only impressive, but then being around you and that environment, you guys live that out. How did those come to be in your time? And just explain to us maybe some ways that you do live that out.
Well, when I got to the hall, I think our mission was to be the America's best showcase for sports, and we kind of modified that a little bit collectively with our staff and our boards. That again, that it's really about honoring the heroes of the game is the first tenet. And that doesn't mean the worship of football heroes, because every one of them is, they didn't fall out of bed great. They had to earn it. They had to work for it. And in doing so, it was a fight for them to do it. And not everybody's going to be a football player. And we think of them as big, strong, talented, fast, quick. And in reality, they didn't fall out of bed great. They had to fight to be great. And coaches like yourself and others help mold them to that position. And so, not everybody's going to have a bronze bust in Canton, Ohio, but I think we can learn from their journey that, they didn't give up. They persevered. They got up when they got knocked down. Peyton Manning is likely to be a first ballot Hall of Famer. Brett Favre was a first ballot Hall of Famer.
Mm-hmm.
But Brett Favre had more interceptions than anybody in the history of the league. Peyton certainly had a lot of interceptions, but it didn't stop them. So our thought is that by doing that, preserving the history of the game, promoting the values of the game, how you play the game, and certainly not just the game of football, but the game of life. And then finally, celebrating excellence everywhere. Kevin, we kind of think that while you may not be a football player with the bronze bust in Canton, Ohio, by looking at those values, by understanding that journey, by honoring these heroes, it might make us a better dad, or a better mom, or a better executive, or a better coach, or certainly a better community, and maybe even a better nation. And so, to me, I call it the Church of Football, and we think that it's really not, again, about the worship of the game of football or the worship of the football hero. It's really about their journey. And as you know, I got the coolest job in the world. I get to do a lot of cool things, but I also get to knock on the door and tell these guys that they're going to Canton, Ohio, which is where every player wants to end his career, in Canton, Ohio. And it's when I tell them that we're going to keep their legacy at the Pro Football Hall of Fame, you can see that they're not thinking about how much money they made. They're not thinking about their records or their rings or their Lombardi trophies. I guarantee you, I've looked into their eyes and kind of seen into their soul. Every one of them is thinking about the mom that drove them to practice when they were 8 years old.
Yeah.
Or the dad that wouldn't let them quit when things got tough, or the coach that inspired them to be more unselfish so that they could help the team even more. And you can see their journey just in front of them. And They moved from being somebody who loved this game and benefited from this game to being somebody who's now an ambassador of the game and those values. So for me, the Hall of Fame is a great museum. There's only, I think there's 34,000 museums in the United States. There's only about 14% of them that are accredited research and archival institutions by the American Alliance of Museums. The Pro Football Hall of Fame is the only sports museum that is accredited, and one of, like I said, probably about 30, 35, 3,600 that are accredited. It's a great museum, but I also think that the Hall of Fame is more than a museum. It is this message of excellence, and that excellence is not easy to come by. Like I said, these guys had to earn it, and excellence in many books, in accounting and in sales and a lot of things, is probably a clean white sheet of paper. But in reality, in football, let me tell you, excellence is, snot coming out of your nose and blood coming out of your mouth, and a dirty uniform and a whole lot of failure before you get to greatness. And that is a great message. And to me, that embodies the Hall of Fame. That is the spirit of a Hall of Famer. And right now, during this time when our country has, for the first time really in its history, shut down, and the world has shut down voluntarily at the same time, and a lot of people are struggling with jobs and their companies and are having challenges, and we're trying to figure out how to go forward. That spirit is what we need, Kevin. That spirit of coming together and being a team, persevering and fighting for excellence to get America going again, to educate our kids, to make advances in healthcare, and to really spread some joy and some happiness during these difficult times. I think there's a lot to learn from our Hall of Famers, not just about football, but about life.
Yeah, for sure. That's great. I was going to ask you that maybe a little bit later, but I'm going to go to that right now. Like, what do you think like separates? Is there one common thing? We talk about these values. I know hard work, I know talent, but like, is there one commonality that you see that exists in these Hall of Famers that made them Hall of Famers rather than not being able to have the opportunity to come to Canton?
Well, we've got small guys that are incredibly fast, like Gerald Green. We've got big guys like Jonathan Ogden, Walter Pace. We've got guys who are strong, like Larry Allen. We've got, there's all different kinds of guys. But I do think that when you look at them, they have a vision to see what can happen and to want it. They have a passion for what they're doing. They work incredibly hard, and they have a perseverance to not let adversity stop them. And in the process, not only do they persevere and succeed, but they drag a whole lot of other people with them, a place of greatness that they didn't get to attain. So I don't think it's one thing, but I think it is. I think it is passion. I think it is vision. I think it is perseverance. I think it is also, something that a lot of the people don't. I'm sure in your past coaching experience, people don't talk about, but I think it's love. Those guys love those guys in the locker room. Those offensive linemen love offensive linemen, and they would die for each other. In Scripture, it says that no greater love has any man than this, than he laid down his life for his friend. Well, that's what a lineman is doing on every place. It may not be laying down his life, but he's laying down his body.
Yeah.
He is sacrificing his own personal glory for somebody who can come behind him and make greater advances for the overall greater good. And so I have found, so many people kind of think of these guys as being famous and therefore sometimes being arrogant or having a big ego that comes with that sometimes. I have found them to be incredibly thoughtful, to be willing to think through to another level, to figure stuff out so that they can persevere and drag a lot of other people there. But yeah, I think I think it's more than their size, more than their speed, more than their quickness. I think it has a lot to do with heart.
Yeah, that's good. That's real good. Well, hey, let's let's dive in or talk a little bit about your sports background. You were a basketball player in college overseas. What do you think? What did the game of basketball teach you growing up, or just overall? I'm sure it's a lot of the things that you're talking about right now. But is there something that sticks out to you, David, that just the game of basketball? Before we jump into your experiences with football, what about the game of hoops?
Well, let me say, I always loved football the most, but when I was young, I was bigger than other kids. And so where I was at, they weighed you. And I went to a 3-year high school. And by then, I kind of knew that I was a basketball player and that was going to get me to college. But we corrected it in my next generation because both my boys played football. And one was a first round draft choice in 2008. The other one, and he played at USC when they were, led the NC2A with the most consecutive wins, which was 35. And my other son played at Duke, where they were leading the NC2A in most consecutive losses with 22 at the time. So we had both records at our house. But I had the experience because I wasn't allowed to play football as a young guy of learning basketball. And to me, I had a whole lot of coaches. I just had the opportunity, since you have been a coach, Kevin, of calling my high school coach and my college coach. I did it 2 days ago, who are alive. One is about to turn 90, and the other one's in his late 80s. And to tell them, to thank them for the impact that they had in my life. And I think that there's a whole lot of American young men and now women, because of Title IX, who are being raised by coaches. And I have a great heart for coaches. I appreciate educators, and I think an education is critically important. But I think because of some of the pressures that have been placed on educators politically for test scores and other stuff of their kids, that sometimes our education has been about uh, teaching information and how to process it. And in my experience, both with myself and my sons, coaching is about teaching life and how to live it. And I get to speak all over the United States. And, seldom have I found somebody who went back to their calculus teacher, their chemistry teacher for life advice. Now, I'm not saying that those teachers aren't great and they are great at teaching calculus and chemistry. But what I am saying is, in my experience, when a lot of us get into life and we are trying to save our marriage or survive a divorce or a healthcare crisis or crisis of integrity or finances, whatever it is, a kid going sideways, man, a lot of times and I know others have gone back to our coach, because that coach taught you how to get up when you got knocked down. And he taught you how to keep going when you didn't think you could go on any further. And I think that, I think any team sport, or matter of fact, any sport, but especially team sports, I believe, teach you that by giving yourself to something that's bigger than you are, that team, instead of losing relevance, you actually gain relevance. You are a part of something that's bigger than yourself. And then buying into that coach and subordinating yourself, the integrity that comes with the discipline and diligence of preparation, both physically and mentally and technically, and then the respect that you learn for your teammates who are doing the same things and sacrificing for them and them sacrificing for you. And then finally, respect for your opponent, who may be different than you, and you learn that your differences can make you stronger. When you're in the huddle, there is no Republicans or Democrats there.
Yeah.
There's no, you know, there's no Baptist, Buddhist. It's not your religion. And certainly color doesn't matter. I think our Hall of Famers have been on the very advanced edge of racial relations because it is all about what Martin Luther King said when he talked about his great dream that someday his 4 children would be judged not by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. I know in the game of football, we measure character by the yard. It's pretty easy to determine. And so I just think all of those are great lessons. I think there's a lot of I also think there's a lot of metaphors for life, and I think that there's a lot of parallels with spirituality and faith.
Mhm.
And so, in my experience, I will tell you, my mom and dad couldn't read or write, and if it wasn't for those coaches and wasn't for the game, uh, I wouldn't have gone on to college to be an English literature major, so I could learn from all these great books that they didn't have. My parents, I didn't get. In many respects, it gave me a chance to not only tour the world, uh, but also to go to law school as well. I got a postgraduate scholarship that paid part of my law school. So sports to me is a little bit why I'm at the Pro Football Hall of Fame. Uh, you know, um, when I was first invited to apply for the job, I kind of did my best Will Ferrell imitation and said, I'm kind of a big deal and I'm doing other stuff. No thanks. But I sent the description for the job that a friend had sent to me, and I sent it to my wife, and I said, "Hey, you'll never guess what happened today." And she called me about 15 minutes later, Kevin. She said, "Hey, we're going to go do this." And I said, well, sweetheart, I already told them no. And she said, "That's okay. You can call them back." And I said, "Well, baby, we got this other big project I was working on, and we've got partners." And she said, "Yeah, but it's time to pass the baton to those guys."
Mhm.
And again, we're from California. So I said, "Sweetheart, I don't know if you know this, but it is cold in Ohio. It is colder than you have ever been." And she said, "That's okay. I can handle it." And I talked about kids and grandkids. I gave every excuse possible. And finally I said, "Sweetheart, why do you want to do this so much?" And she said, "Have you read this?" And I had not even read it when I sent it to her, Kevin. She said, "You need to read this because this is what you believe." And I do believe that if we spent more money on balls and whistles, that we would spend a lot less money on guns and grenades and missiles. Uh, just teaching the kids of the world to play better. And so, for me, I do think it's the Church of Football. I think what you guys have started there in Canton is very, very special. And for however long I get to be involved in it, it's a privilege to be there.
That's great. Let's backtrack just a little bit before that. Of course, you spent some time at the Arena Football League, spent some time as a mayor and councilman in California. Like, where do those experiences in another same sport with the Arena Football League, but also in the world of politics, where do those fit into your current role? What are some things that you picked up in those experiences that you feel are valuable right now to you and your team at the Hall?
Well, I'll tell you, I think we all learn from our experiences, and I'm a little bit of a Calvinist in that I think that God plans every step of our path, including the times we screw up,
Yeah,
for a reason.
so true. So true.
And I have had some significant screw ups in my life. I don't mean to say to people, be like me. But what I will say is, I think those experiences, I learned a lot about service. I learned a lot about leadership. I learned a lot, mostly about persevering. And I met some wonderful people along the way that taught me great lessons, that were generous with their knowledge and experience. One of those guys, when I was when I went in after about 2 years in the Arena Football League to meet Commissioner Paul Tagliabue, he we sat in his office and we talked a little bit about the game, and then he said, "Hey, stay here," and he went and got uh, his kind of right hand guy, which was a guy named Roger Goodell. And Roger came over and we sat down and we really had uh, dinner once a month after that, probably for about 10 years. And mostly what we talked about was the integrity of the game and the impact that the game and the platform could have on other people and the great good that could come out of it. When I agreed to do this, he sent me a message, and I'll never forget it. It said, "We will make a difference beyond any imagined."
Wow. Yeah, that's good.
And I think about that frequently, especially when times are tough and when I screw up again. Because I think just during this pandemic, there was a week not long ago where we had partnered with somebody who uh, uh, helped us at the hall with others provide 2.4 million meals to people who suddenly found themselves in need in 11 different NFL cities. We also, for Veterans Day, had a guy named Corporal Kyle Carpenter, who is the youngest recipient of the Congressional Medal of Honor, and in Afghanistan fell on a grenade to save his comrades. And to talk about his journey and the 3 years he spent at Walter Reed Hospital was inspiring not only to other veterans, but frankly, other Americans. Right after that, we had a college, Lake Erie University, come in where they'd had problems in their locker rooms on race relations and anger. And the coach brought him to the hall immediately after that to listen to Corporal Carpenter and myself talk about what the game teaches you. And I know that it impacted their lives. And I could go on and on and on and on, where this is more than football, but it's using this incredible platform of football. I'm very proud of what the NFL has done to get through this season. I mean, Ohio State has canceled 3 games themselves. I think there have been well over 130 canceled in college football. But the NFL, is now getting into, I think, week 15. Yeah. And they postponed some games, but they played every game. Mm-hmm. And that has required owners and coaches and players and the unions and the networks and the officials and everybody to work together. And again, I think that's a great lesson for America. Mm-hmm. So I think that all of our experiences help us. I think I'm still learning and I'm still making mistakes. But I think I've learned some from very prominent mistakes in the past.
Yeah, I just want to echo that. I appreciate you sharing that, David, because I think you're saying 2 things to me that are everything. And we've talked about this on here multiple times, that, everybody has a story and everybody has a struggle, and I appreciate both of them. And I don't know where I would be if it wasn't for those failures or mistakes. You keep using the word perseverance, which I love. I'm all about resiliency. I think if people are listening right now, that to me is a big separator in people that are able to continue to have that discipline and move on and be successful in life. So I'm glad that you mentioned these things, and I hope people are really listening to you when it comes to this. Share about your personal experiences and just in general. And I think another thing, your faith appears to be a rock solid foundation, from my perspective. Has it always been that way, or just why is that so important to you in your walk or this journey?
Yeah, listen, I appreciate that, Kevin. That's a kind compliment, but it shows you how I've got you fooled. Maybe others, because I don't think my faith is rock solid at all. It is not because I'm stronger. It is not because I'm more capable or smarter or better. It is because I'm not. I've learned from some prominent mistakes in my past that I'm capable of anything. And what I do believe, though, I believe that Jesus Christ kind of gave his life to die on the cross and rise from the dead to forgive me. Yeah. So I'm not better than anybody else, but I do think I'm forgiven. Mm-hmm. And as an athlete, when you're not worried about making mistakes, when you feel like you're forgiven, when you feel like you have a freedom to fly, that's when you're really playing well. And if you screw up, okay, I'm forgiven. Let's move on. It's not a license to do bad things, but it is saying, hey, let's focus on the good stuff. Tony Dungy, who is a great man of faith that I admire a great deal, shared with me not long ago with all the things that are going on with George Floyd and the race relations and everything there, police reform. It's Romans 12:21. It says, do not be overcome by evil, but overcome evil by doing good. And when Christ died for me, it allows me to hopefully not focus on the evil, but just to spend my life focusing on the good that I can do that can maybe help overcome the evil in my life. And so I have enjoyed it. I'm kind of saved by the grace of Jesus Christ. and in spite of myself, I am forgiven. And I think that there's a lot that, that is similar to the Hall of Fame. When I knock on the door with these guys and tell them that they're going to Canton, like I said earlier, there's a stamp of approval, affirmation, whether it's an owner or a player or a coach, that is like God saying here on earth for these guys' careers, well done, good and faithful servant.
Yeah, right.
And I've seen it in the eyes of Randy Moss or Jerry Kramer, who waited 45 years for somebody to say it to him. And I think that while the Pro Football Hall of Fame is really cool, and I'm told those bronze busts will last for 40,000 years, from a spiritual standpoint, I believe that there's a place called heaven, and I believe it in faith, and it's going to last. Eternity is a lot longer than 40,000 years. And there's a verse, interestingly enough, that I think is a great parallel for what I'm privileged to do. I think it's Revelations 3:20. It says, "Behold, I stand at the door and I knock, and any man who answers the door, I will come into him and dine with him and he with me." So, God's Hall of Fame is not nearly as exclusive as the Pro Football Hall of Fame. Anybody can get into it, but it's going to last longer. I think it's going to be even greater than the wonderful, what I call the most inspiring place on earth, the Pro Football Hall of Fame in Canton. But yeah, I think that faith for me is something that I have relied on and needed a lot in my life, through adversity, through challenges. And again, I think, James 1:3, Romans 5:3, they talk about to consider it all joy when we encounter adversity, because we know that the testing of our faith is going to, provide us perseverance, and perseverance, hope, and hope, doesn't disappoint. And so, I think life is not easy. Just like football in the NFL is not easy. It is smash mouth life, in our relationships, in our business, in everything. And the question is, are we going to ignore it? Are we going to be defeated by it? Or are we going to attack it? Are we going to have hope? Are we going to really be excited, not just in everything we can acquire or the money we can have, but the difference we can make? And to me, in my life, I have found that it's not easy, but boy, it is the best place to be.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. I appreciate you sharing. Amen to that. I want to close up here before we get into somewhat of a rapid fire. I'd be anxious just to know, David, like what drives you personally at this stage of your career? Is there a why? Is there an X factor? Is there, however you want to define that? But like, what drives you to do what you do every single day and have the impact that you're having?
Well, I think I was talking to my son the other day that played with the Falcons and was a three-time All-American at USC, Sammy. And we were talking about the ability to encourage others. And everybody's got a gift, and I'm still trying to develop mine. But I will say that I care about people. Sometimes Gene Upshaw, who when he was head of the players union and I was head of the Arena Football League, we did 3 collective bargaining agreements, and he once put his arm around me and took me outside. And even though I was bigger than him, he seemed like he was 10 feet taller than me. He had this John Wayne-esque personality, and he was a bit larger than life. And he kind of figuratively put his arm around me and said, "Hey, let me give you some advice. Sometimes I think you care too much."
Hmm.
And I don't know. I don't know. I think you can care too much. So I love having something to care about, whether it's my family, whether it's my purpose at the hall, whether it's my friends or the people I work with. Uh, you know, I once, I'll tell you, I had a great lesson, and I hope this doesn't take too long, Kevin, but I was watching PBS, which I don't do very often. It makes me sound very smart, but I was watching, the public broadcasting system, and it was Bill Gates and Warren Buffett in front of a bunch of graduate schools at the University of Nebraska. And the last question was, how do you define success? And Bill Gates gave what I thought was a very articulate and somewhat predictable answer, that he had made all this money and now he could use that money to go make a difference and cure pediatric AIDS in Africa. And it was a great answer. And then Warren Buffett, who I've since had the opportunity to meet several times, uh, he gave an answer, and his answer was not as articulate. It was kind of rough and gruff, but boy, it was really good. He said, I've had a lot of friends who've made a lot of money and they've had buildings named after them and universities even named after them. And he said, but what I found in life is that the way you feel really successful is to feel loved.
Mm.
And he says, if you're loved by your wife or your kids or the people you work with or your dog, if you're loved by somebody, you feel successful.
Yeah.
And he said, what I've learned is that the best way to be loved is to love. Now, I've also learned that I can't just be a people pleaser. And I've learned that there's a lot of things I do, or sometimes the way situations are, where people don't love me at all. But I do have found that I think God loves me all the time. And there's a purpose in what we're doing. And I do know to the greatest extent I can, and I'm not perfect and I don't do that all the time. I'll guarantee I still lose my temper and sometimes my language is not what it should be. But I love to live life, loving life and loving what I'm doing and loving the people I'm doing it with. And that's all you can hope for because it's spectacular.
Yeah, well, and once again, I think from the outside looking in, David, not that my input matters, but I can see that, I can sense that when I'm in a room with you or just in general. So I think that's extremely commendable and something that you've inspired me with here today. Before we finish with rapid fire, though, I guess maybe the most important question before these 3 pointers is where do you get all those nice suits at, man?
I'll tell you, I was fortunate. I actually got kind of defrauded by a tailor that I spent a lot of money on a suit and he left with it. And but through that experience, I met a guy whose name is Tam Taylor, Tam Truang. He is from Vietnam. He came from Vietnam with $7 in his pockets and the ability to make suits. And I enjoyed this guy. He's become a dear friend. Uh, he actually has saved me a lot of money because he makes great suits at a cheap price, and his his shop is over a liquor store in Westminster, California. But man, I've loved knowing this guy, and I've had my kids meet this guy. He works every day of the year except for Christmas. If you're there on Thanksgiving, he's working on Thanksgiving. He sent every one of his kids to college, uh, but all my suits, I'm kind of too big to get them at the normal places. A guy like you can
Yeah.
go to a store, Nordstrom's or someplace, and you can get a great looking suit, and it looks good on you, Kevin. For me, it is hard to make a 400-pound man look good, but Tam Truong is a good guy, and that's another relationship that I've really enjoyed.
That's great. Well, I've seen pretty much every color, so he's doing something right there. Hey, I'm going to go rapid fire to finish. If you want to take a little bit longer, then we'll wrap up here just with some information about the Hall of Fame. As you know, call this 3 pointers just because of my basketball background. So I'm gonna let you, the 6'9" guy, shoot some 3 pointers here to finish the
Well, I
show.
want you to know when I played, they didn't have 3 pointers. Okay.
Yeah, I wasn't gonna bring that up.
Okay.
Number one, if people could just, and there's so much in here, right? But if people could learn one thing from this talk and just take that away and just really hold on to it or apply that in their lives, what would that one thing be, David?
Don't give up. Don't quit. Persevere. Keep going. Fight and love.
Yeah. It's good. That's good. Okay, and number two, if David could have come over in Kevin's shoes today and played my role and asked David a question, what question would have you asked that I did not ask today?
Gosh, that in and of itself is a question. Um, it probably would have been the question, what would I change about my life if I could? And and I think the answer is, while that's a good question, I don't think I happen to be a Calvinist, like I said, and I think that everything in life happens for a reason.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's God's purpose to teach us something in our failure, even in our sin, and to prepare us for something.
Yeah.
And I've seen this with Jim Kelly, who went to 4 Super Bowls and lost them all, but never win, but never gave up. And later on, he's the guy that God chooses to fight cancer. And I could give you stories on stories of that. So um, that would probably be my question of it. But
Yeah, I love it. Well, finally, good stuff is the name of this. You've given us a ton of good stuff already, but what's some good stuff you can give us in closing right now, David, to wrap up? Anything that's just on your heart, your mind, or just in general that you feel is appropriate with where we're at?
yeah, listen, for where we're at right now in this pandemic, and a lot of people, I was talking to somebody earlier today that I've lost a lot of friends, and normally in a year I'll lose one, two, three Hall of Famers, and in the last 17 months, because we didn't have an enshrinement in 2020, uh, but when the last time we met in 2019, I've lost 12 Hall of Famers so far.
Mm.
And I think this environment we're in, it's not just COVID-19, it is the stress, the pressure, uh, the fear of what's going to happen, the oppression, that we're feeling as fathers, as mothers, as parents, as communities. And there's an expression that Jerry Jones has that he talks about leadership. He calls it having having a high tolerance for ambiguity. And that you don't know what's going to happen, you're not sure how it's going to go, but hey, we're going to play this game. Let's go. And to me, some of that is living by faith. Some of that is having the courage to do it. But right now, I would say I personally believe that the very best is ahead. And we're going to learn a lot from this. We're going to learn how to Zoom just like you and I are now. Maybe we don't have to travel so much, but travel is still going to be important. I think maybe our families are going to be more important. Our faith is going to be more important. But I think that there's a lot of exciting things ahead. Historically, Kevin, the Pro Football Hall of Fame keeps the history of the league. And the NFL started in 1920, which was right after the 1918 and 1919 bouts of the Spanish flu pandemic in the United States. And people wanted to get out. They wanted to get going. They were tired of being locked up. I'm hoping that that's going to be the way. And I think for all of your listeners and viewers who are in Canton, I think that there's a chance that we'll have the first full stadium for football in about 18 months in the United States. And I know with the networks that will be covering us, we're going to have the greatest gathering in football ever. And this is going to be a great kickoff for economic development in our region. It's going to be a great return to the game. And I think it's going to be a great opportunity to help America get going again. So I'm excited about the future.
I love it. Well, hey, 3 for 3. You knocked them all down. You can find out more about the Hall of Fame. Follow them on Twitter, Pro Football HOF. David's personal account at PFHOF Prez, PREZ. What else can you tell us right now about the Hall of Fame, David? Here in closing.
Yeah, listen, we are open. The Hall of Fame had never closed, but Christmas and Thanksgiving every year. Mm-hmm. And then we were closed for 93 days because of the quarantine. Right now we're open. We're going to continue to stay open. We have protocols there that I believe it's safer to be at the Pro Football Hall of Fame going through and learning about history than it is to be at home, to be quite honest with you. And so we would like to invite everybody to come in, experience the most inspiring place on earth. bring their family and friends. If you haven't been there for a long time, there's some cool stuff there that you're really going to enjoy.
Well, David, hey, I just want to personally thank you for this time. I mean, you're an awesome leader. You're very inspiring. You're having a great deal of impact on so many different levels. I mean, I know it's through the game of football, but being close by and knowing some of the people that you know, I just know that there's a great deal of leadership that comes out of there because of you, the team that you're establishing, everything else that you're doing. So I really appreciate you spending some time with us. Everything you shared today is going to be great for people to listen to and apply. And hey, maybe someday we'll go to John's Bar and Grill Samantha's or something up there and then get a meal together.
That's great. I appreciate the good stuff, and I appreciate all the good stuff that you're doing, Kevin. Thank you.
Thanks so much, David. Well, hey, once again, dive into this episode. Take some time to listen to some of the things that David's saying, the good and bad that he's gone through in his life, and just in general, the ability to persevere, to fight, to keep going on, and some of these other characteristics that he's talking about that some of these Hall of Famers display. It's really, really good. So thanks again for joining us. Until next time, good stuff.